Doctors often say that people in a coma can sometimes take in more than anyone expects. The rise and fall of voices, the steady conversation of machines, the quiet punctuation of footsteps outside a door. Akusa heard the world, even when her body refused to answer it. She heard her husband speak to the nurses with a calm that didn't match the moment. She heard him say she was gone, as if a life could be summarized into a single sentence, and signed away. She heard the soft pause before a pen touched paper, then the smooth, practiced motion of signatures moving across forms. She heard the familiar hush of the hospital at night, and then, like a metronome, she heard another woman's heels clicking down the hallway, confident, unhurried, toward the nursery where Akusa's babies would be. Akusa couldn't open her eyes yet, but somewhere deep inside that stillness, she wasn't fading. She was organizing herself. She was mapping a way back.
The name carved into the marble above the entrance read Cole Medical Center, in letters so tall that a grown man had to lean his head back just to see the whole thing at once. On a clear night, the building lit up the entire block, its windows glowing like warm lanterns in the heart of the city. From far away, it looked less like a hospital and more like a promise, like something placed carefully in the middle of the city so people could find it when they were afraid and needed help. On the night this story begins, the place looked like a spotlight. Cameras waited outside. Black cars lined the corner, doors opening and closing with quiet efficiency. Women stepped out in gowns that shimmered under streetlights, men in sharp suits with confident smiles. There was laughter, too. Smooth, effortless laughter that tends to live in rooms where people have learned to hide what they really feel behind polished manners. It was the annual charity gala for the hospital's expansion fund, and the entire city had come out to congratulate itself for supporting something important. Inside the atrium, chandeliers hung low and golden, scattering warm light over marble floors so clean they seemed to reflect not just shoes, but status. A jazz band played in the corner, soft and easy, the kind of music that allows conversations to sound elegant, even when they aren't honest. The air smelled like fresh flowers, expensive cologne, and money. At the center of it all, standing at the podium with a microphone in his hand, and the kind of grin that suggested he had personally arranged the world to his liking, was Kwame Washington. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and undeniably attractive in a way that worked well on camera. He wore his tuxedo like it belonged to him. The crowd watched him the way crowds always watched Kwame, as if he was exactly where he should be, as if the building itself rose behind him because he had willed it. Standing just to his left, close enough that every photo captured her, was Desire. She wore a deep gold dress that caught the chandelier light every time she shifted her weight. Her smile was bright, controlled, and practiced. The kind of smile women perfect when they know the world is watching, and they intend to be remembered in the right way. Her hand rested lightly on Kwame's arm, not clinging, not timid, just placed, as if it belonged there. She looked comfortable. She looked included. And that was the point. What the room did not seem to notice, or what it chose not to notice, was that the woman whose name sat quietly behind the very foundation of the hospital was not at the podium. She wasn't in the front row. She wasn't draped in gold. She wasn't being introduced as anything at all. Akusa Cole Washington arrived 40 minutes into the gala. She was tired in a way that lived behind her eyes, the kind of tiredness that comes from responsibility, not late nights at parties. She wore a simple navy dress over a body that was 8.5 months heavy with twins. She had come straight from a board meeting that had run long, a meeting she had called herself, about the hospital's next acquisition. The kind of meeting people in that glittering room would have been shocked to learn. She had the authority to convene. Akusa walked through the grand atrium she had designed herself, past marble she had approved, lighting she had chosen, and a layout she had fought for, because she understood what a healing space should feel like. She moved slowly because of her pregnancy, but her posture was steady. She scanned the crowd for her husband. She found him at the podium. She saw desire beside him. Akusa stopped for one breath, just one, then began moving forward again, calm, controlled, walking toward the front where her husband stood as if he owned the moment. She was almost there when Gloria stepped into her path. Gloria Washington, Kwame's mother, wore a champagne-colored dress and a smile with no warmth behind it. She took Akusa's arm and leaned in close, like she was offering something kind. The smile stayed in place, unshaken, camera ready. "Tonight isn't your night, baby," Gloria whispered, soft enough that only Akusa could hear. Gloria let go, turned back toward the cameras, and laughed lightly at something someone said, as if she hadn't just attempted to erase her daughter-in-law in public. From the side, Bertram appeared, Kwame's older brother. Built wide, certain, always nearby when the family needed something handled without questions. He didn't speak. He simply positioned himself beside Akusa and guided her away from the front. Gently in appearance, firm in intention, toward a side table near the back wall by the kitchen doors, where staff moved in and out. A young usher stood there, already briefed, already prepared to play his part. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the usher said, polite and uncomfortable. "This area is reserved for VIP guests this evening." Akusa looked at him, then at Bertram. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She stood still for a moment, with her hands folded over her belly and her face quiet, as if she was observing something she had already understood long ago. Across the room, Kwame noticed her. He saw his wife near the back wall, alone, visibly pregnant with his children, placed beside the kitchen doors like an afterthought. For a second, the decent thing would have been simple. Step down, walk toward her, bring her forward, introduce her, honor her. Kwame lifted his glass toward desire instead. He smiled for a camera that clicked at that exact moment. He did not call Akusa forward. Reginald Osei crossed the room to her. Reginald was the chairman of the Cole Medical Group board, a quiet man in his 60s whose calm felt earned. He carried himself like someone who had seen enough to know that real power doesn't always demand the center of the stage. He walked directly to Akusa, and when he reached her, he bowed his head, not a small social nod, but a real bow, the kind you offer to someone you respect deeply. "The board knows what you've built, ma'am," he said quietly. "Tonight doesn't change that." Akusa met his eyes and said evenly, "It never does." Because it didn't. It never had. What no one in that glittering atrium seemed willing to understand was that every chandelier above their heads, every tile beneath their shoes, every donor check being celebrated that night traced back to one woman's name. And that woman was standing near the kitchen doors, being treated as though she didn't belong in her own legacy. Akusa drove herself home alone. The city lights slid past her windows. She didn't turn on the radio. She didn't call anyone to narrate her pain. One hand held the steering wheel. The other rested on her belly, where her babies moved and shifted as if they were impatient to arrive. She passed the hospital once, then again, circling the block without meaning to, the way people circle thoughts that won't settle. Cole Medical Center glowed tall against the dark sky, its brightness steady and familiar. Her presence was built into every brick and every watt of light, yet her name wasn't being spoken inside the building tonight, the way it should have been. She looked at it once, long, steady, and then drove home. She was still awake at midnight when the first pain arrived. By 2 a.m, she was calling Pete. Go back. Back before the marble, before the gala, before the gold dress and the camera flashes. Back to a village in Ghana where roads were red dirt and the evenings smelled like cook fires and rain that hadn't fallen yet, but promised it would. Back to a little girl sitting on the steps of her grandmother's house, bare feet in dust, a book open in her lap, reading like those pages were nourishment. Akuza's grandmother was a small, strong woman whose hands carried the story of decades of work. In their village, people came to her door when they were unwell. She didn't have a formal clinic. She had herbs, patience, and a steadiness that made frightened people feel safe. She listened before she spoke. She observed before she acted. Often, not always, but often, people who arrived weak left feeling stronger. Akuza watched her do it over and over until it became a language. One day, Akuza asked, "Grandmother, where did you learn all of this?" Her grandmother looked at her and said, "I didn't learn it, child. I paid attention." Then she handed Akuza another book. The morning Akuza left for America on a full academic scholarship, her grandmother stood at the gate before the sun had fully risen. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatize the moment. She removed a silver locket from her own neck, simple, worn smooth by years, and pressed it into Akuza's palm. Inside the locket was a folded piece of paper. Akuza opened it right there. The handwriting was unsteady, but the words were clear. What you build in silence will speak for you when the time comes. Akuza folded the note, clicked the locket shut, and placed it around her neck. She never took it off again. In America, Akuza was extraordinary in the quiet way that doesn't announce itself. She studied healthcare economics. She worked 2 jobs to cover what the scholarship didn't. She read every night until her eyes burned, and then she read some more. She wasn't the loudest person in any room. She wasn't always the one people noticed first, but she was always the one who came prepared. She understood systems and institutions the way some people understand music, naturally, precisely, like it lived inside her. She met Kwame at a campus networking event during her junior year. Kwame walked into the room like the room had been waiting for him. Loud laughter, easy charm, a smile that arrived fast. He pursued her with confidence she found magnetic at the time. She believed he had depth beneath the surface. She believed that confidence meant character. They married 2 years after graduation. Akuza wore the silver locket to the ceremony. The building of her empire happened slowly and deliberately, the way real things are built, while Kwame chased titles and connections and the feeling of being important. Akuza worked. She invested early, carefully, quietly, through a holding company whose name pointed to no one. She acquired a small failing clinic in her 3rd year of marriage, then another, then a larger facility. She brought in the right people, built the right systems, and turned struggling clinics into a regional network. Then the network became something bigger, something no one saw coming. She kept Kwame's name off the documents by design, not to hide from him, but because when she tried to explain what she was building, he smiled and said, distracted, "That's nice, baby," and returned to his phone. Akusa understood then that he wasn't ready to recognize what she was creating. He might never be. So she built in silence, the way her grandmother had told her to. And one day, silence spoke in the loudest language modern society understands. Numbers. $65 billion worth. A young woman alone in a small rented office, signing acquisition papers by lamplight. The same woman, years later, standing near the kitchen doors at a gala in the building she financed, being told she didn't belong at the front. That distance, from lamplight to chandeliers, was the whole story. The twins came into the world on a cold night that felt like the city itself was holding its breath. The labor was long and hard. The doctors' faces stayed professional, but their eyes carried concern they tried not to show. The babies arrived, a boy and a girl, small and perfect and determined, crying the moment they hit the air, the way babies do when they want the world to know they are here. But Akusa didn't hear them cry. By the time her daughter drew her first breath, Akusa was already somewhere else. Her body had given everything it had, then gone very still. Machines began to sound more urgent. Nurses moved fast. The word they used among themselves was coma. They explained it to Kwame in a private room with calm voices. They said the brain sometimes protects itself. They said no one could predict when she would wake. They said recovery was possible. Kwame sat alone in that room for a long time after the doctors left. He sat by Akusa's bed for 3 days. He held her hand. On the second night, he put his head down on the edge of her mattress and cried quietly, the way people cry when the future is suddenly not under their control. Then Gloria came. She arrived on the morning of the 4th day with coffee and a calm that felt rehearsed. She sat beside her son, took his hand, and spoke softly, reasonable, gentle, but firm. The kind of voice a person uses when they want something to feel inevitable. "You have 2 newborn babies," she said, "and a wife who may not wake soon. You have to think about the children. You have to think about the future." Bertram came that evening and echoed it, adding legal concerns, timelines, and complications. He talked about decisions, responsibilities, and what would happen if things weren't handled properly. He didn't say the quiet part out loud, but it lived inside his words. Opportunities appear when people are too exhausted to fight. By day 5, Kwame called Desire. By day 7, Kwame Washington stood in the corridor of Cole Medical Center. Corridors Akusa had approved, floors she had funded, lighting she had chosen, and told an attending nurse that his wife had passed during the night. He said it calmly. He was dressed well. Bertram stood beside him. The nurse looked confused. There had been no emergency alert, no sudden change recorded. She double-checked the system. She looked back at Kwame, uncertain. Kwame looked back with certainty that felt like pressure. He requested the paperwork. The nurse processed what she was given, because in that moment she didn't have reason to believe she was being pulled into a story that wasn't true. That evening, a small private gathering was held at the house. Family, a few friends, Desiree at Kwame's side. Kwame announced Akusa was gone. speaking about love and loss with the kind of composure that photographs well. Gloria wept with her hand over her mouth, dramatic and controlled. Bertram shook his head and embraced his brother. A tasteful memorial followed in the days after. Within 2 weeks, Desiree moved into Akusa's home. She walked through the rooms Akusa had decorated, the kitchen Akusa had chosen, the nursery Akusa had painted with her own hands during the 7th month of pregnancy. Desiree adjusted things. She replaced items. She rearranged the way a person rearranges a space when they want it to feel like it has always belonged to them. Her perfume appeared where Akusa's had been. Her clothes found space in closets Akusa had built. Bertram had already found a lawyer, efficient, discreet, and uncurious. Through a process that moved faster than it should have, paperwork began shifting. Forms were signed. Records were updated. Desiree began signing documents connected to the babies, as though she had the right to do so. Names were changed on papers. Choices Akusa had made were overridden, and the world outside accepted it, because the world often accepts whatever is presented with confidence and stamps. In room 4B, nothing changed. Machines kept their steady rhythm. Monitors blinked their green lines. Nurses came and went. Most of them did not know Akusa's name, not beyond what a chart displayed. She was a patient in a private suite, another quiet room in a large building full of quiet rooms. But one nurse knew. Her name was Adoa, and she had worked at Cole Medical Center for 11 years. She knew exactly who Akusa Cole Washington was, who she had been long before the gala, long before the cameras. Adoa came to room 4B every morning before her shift started. She stood beside the bed and spoke softly, the way you speak to someone you are certain can hear you, even when they cannot answer. "Dr. Cole," she said, every morning without fail, "we're still here. Doctors say coma patients sometimes register everything, the voices, the machines, the footsteps." Akusa heard Kwame in the corridor telling the nurse she was gone. She heard the pen scratching paper. She heard Desire's heels outside her room, confident, measured, unhurried, like someone walking through a plan she believed had already succeeded. She heard her babies cry somewhere down the hall on the first night of their lives. And she heard Adoa every morning, steady as dawn. "Dr. Cole, we're still here." In whatever place the coma held her, Akusa was not fading. She was gathering herself. She was patient in the way only a woman who built $65 billion in silence knows how to be patient. The months moved slowly, heavy, and quiet. Outside room 4B, the world continued. People ate, laughed, argued, slept. They lived without thinking about the woman in the private suite. Inside, the machines kept time. Shifts changed. Seasons shifted. And every morning, Adoa came. What the people who had publicly moved on from Akusa did not understand, could not understand without truly knowing her, was that silence had always been her element. She had built an empire in it. She had walked through boardrooms, negotiations, and decisions of staggering complexity without needing to perform her power for anyone. She had never relied on being the loudest voice in the room. She relied on being the most prepared. So even here, even in a body that wouldn't yet respond, she was doing her work in her own way, listening, remembering, preparing. Pete received a brief call from Reginald Osei 3 weeks after Kwame made his announcement. Reginald said only, "I understand. We wait." Pete replied, "We wait." They hung up. Neither filed public statements. Neither rushed to create chaos. They stood guard on either side of the truth and allowed time to do what time always does: reveal what performance tries to hide. 8 months passed. The Cole Medical Group held its annual board gala again, its biggest event. The night donors and press and city officials filled the atrium. Over those months, Kwame had built himself into the story. Interviews, photos, carefully curated messages about his grief and his strength. Gloria managed the narrative. Bertram managed the paperwork. Desire stood beside Kwame, looking like the future. The city believed him. Why wouldn't it? He was charming, he was composed, he was visible. In private, Kwame tried through multiple lawyers to access Akusa's estate and her controlling share in Cole Medical Group. He believed, as some people believe, that marriage automatically means ownership. Attempt after attempt was blocked. Petty was there each time, patient and immovable, offering only a single explanation. The estate was under legal review. Kwame grew frustrated, but not afraid. He assumed time would bend the truth in his favor. He secured a speaking slot at the gala, planning to announce himself as the new face of the institution. Reginald confirmed the slot and said nothing else. 3 weeks before the gala, at 4:47 in the morning, Akusa Cole Washington opened her eyes. Adoa was there, as she always was at that hour, sitting beside the bed with coffee, speaking her quiet daily words. When she looked up and saw Akusa looking back, Adoa set the coffee down very carefully, as if she didn't trust her hands. For a long moment they stared at each other, Adoa in shock and relief, Akusa in clear, steady presence. Akusa's right hand moved slowly, with enormous effort, toward the silver locket at her throat. Her fingers closed around it, as if it anchored her to herself. "Pete," Akusa whispered. Her voice was barely air, but it was a word with weight. Adoa was already pressing the call button, already crying, already saying, "Yes, Dr. Cole, yes, I'm calling her right now." Pete arrived within the hour. The two women sat together in room 4B for a long time, speaking in low voices. Pete told Akusa everything that happened while she was unable to move, every public announcement, every change in the house, every shift in the baby's records, every attempt to access the estate, every step that had been taken as if Akusa would never return. Akusa listened with a face that barely moved. No outbursts, no dramatic reactions, just focus, just the kind of stillness that comes from a mind built for strategy, not theater. When Petty finished, silence filled the room. Then Akusa said, "The gala." Petty hesitated. 3 weeks. Akusa nodded once. That's enough. After Petty left, she called Reginald Osei. He answered on the first ring. "All understood," he said. They began preparing. For 3 weeks, Akusa recovered in private. Only Pete, Reginald, and Adoa visited. The staff on her floor was asked for discretion, and they gave it freely. Many of them had always known whose name stood behind the hospital. Some had only recently learned. But all of them understood one thing. This was not the kind of story that should be turned into gossip. Akusa spent those weeks rebuilding her strength, eating what Adoa brought, doing slow physical work, returning to her body with discipline. She read every document Pete placed in front of her. She signed what needed signing. She directed what needed directing. She didn't waste energy on anger. She didn't rehearse speeches. She didn't ask for pity. She simply prepared. When she wasn't working, she sat by the window, held her locket, and thought about her grandmother, and about 2 children somewhere in the city who did not yet know their mother was alive. The night of the gala arrived. The atrium was dressed the same way it always was. Chandeliers, flowers, the soft, elegant noise of a room full of people who believed they were watching progress. Cameras were positioned. Press outlets waited. Donors smiled. Gloria sat in the front row like a queen. Bertram sat nearby, watchful. Desire stood beside Kwame, polished and poised. Kwame took the podium and began speaking about vision, about the future, about legacy, about continuing Cole Medical Group's growth under his leadership. He spoke about honoring his late wife's work, presenting himself as the brave public face, carrying forward what she started. Then the main doors opened. Akuso walked in. She wore a simple white dress, no jewelry except the silver locket at her throat. Her head was lifted, her shoulders were back. She walked slowly because her body was still regaining strength, but her steadiness filled the room before she was halfway across it. She did not look around for approval. She did not search for her husband. She walked forward as if the building itself recognized her and made space. Silence moved through the room like a sudden change in weather. It began at the back, where people first saw her. Then it traveled forward, table by table, face by face, until the entire atrium became still. Even the band stopped playing, hands lowering as musicians realized something significant had entered. Kwame heard the silence before he saw why. He stopped mid-sentence, turned. Reginald Osei rose from the board table and walked to the podium. With calm authority, he took the microphone from Kwame's hand. Kwame did not resist. He couldn't. He stood, frozen, mouth slightly open, face drained of certainty. Reginald faced the room. His voice was calm, steady, and unmistakable. The voice of a man who had been waiting for the truth to arrive in its own time. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reginald said, "the board of Cole Medical Group would like to formally reintroduce the founder, the majority owner, and the acting chairwoman of this institution, Dr. Akusa Cole, Washington." Pete moved through the room with quiet efficiency, placing bound folders into the hands of reporters and key officials. Inside each folder was the corporate structure of Cole Medical Group, founding documents, acquisition records, ownership proofs, Akusa's name and signature appearing again and again, consistent and undeniable. The documents did not argue. They simply existed. Journalists opened folders, eyes widened, cameras shifted. Gloria's champagne glass stopped midway to her mouth. Bertram went still, calculating. Desire's gaze moved toward the nearest exit, her composure tightening at the edges. Reginald turned and offered the microphone to Akusa. Akusa took it. She looked across the room at the donors, the press, the officials, the board members. She did not perform. She did not exaggerate. She did not raise her voice. Her power was not in volume. It was in certainty. "This hospital was built to heal," she said, quietly and clearly, "and it will continue to do exactly that, under its rightful leadership, effective tonight." She set the microphone down. Then she looked at Kwame once, just once, with a face that held no need for revenge, no need for applause, no need for him to understand. It was the look of a woman acknowledging a truth and moving past it. Akusa walked to the head of the board table and took her seat. For a moment, the room stayed silent, as if people needed time to adjust their understanding of what was real. Then board members rose, one by one, and began to applaud. Not the wild applause of a party, but the steady recognition of authority returning to its source. Kwame stood at the podium with no words left. The cameras that had followed him all evening now followed Akusa as she opened the folder in front of her, picked up her pen, and began to work as if she had never left. Quiet, precise, efficient. The room watched her, not because she demanded it, but because truth has weight when it finally walks into the light. By morning, the story was everywhere. Every outlet ran it. Every platform carried it. Headlines varied, but the core facts remained. A woman the city believed was gone had returned, alive, present, and in control of the institution she built. A public narrative collapsed under the force of documents and timing. People who had smiled too easily for cameras now faced questions they could not charm away. The first formal matter to surface was the paperwork connected to Akusa's passing. Pate had compiled everything with a careful precision she brought to every task. Forms processed, signatures placed, timelines that didn't align, decisions made without proper verification. She delivered the full package to the proper authorities the morning after the gala, organized neatly, supported by records, and impossible to dismiss. Reviews began quickly. Kwame was served at the house, Akusa's house, on a Tuesday morning. He opened the door in a robe, blinking as if he expected the world to keep obeying him. The look on his face as he read the documents was the look of a man realizing that borrowed influence does not survive truth. The access he thought he had began to close. Accounts he attempted to reach were protected by structures he never bothered to understand. Positions he believed were secured by his public image were quietly removed by people who preferred stability over spectacle. Desire left on a Thursday. She packed what she brought and left behind what she could not claim. She did not fight publicly. She did not stage a dramatic scene. She simply left, because the life she wanted depended on a story staying in her favor, and the story had changed. Gloria attempted one interview, one last effort to control perception, but the journalist who took it published her words alongside the documents and the corporate history. In the brightness of proof, performances lose their power. After that, Gloria stopped giving interviews. She stopped attending events. The rooms she once dominated adjusted without her. Bertram faced his own consequences. The processes he helped accelerate were now reviewed in reverse, signature by signature. The lawyer he recruited, previously so comfortable moving quickly, suddenly had to answer questions that could not be dodged. Bertram had believed proximity to Kwame gave him protection. He learned, in an unremarkable courtroom on an ordinary day, that responsibility does not disappear just because someone thinks they are untouchable. The records connected to the twins were corrected through formal channels. The system that had moved too fast in one direction now moved carefully in the other, guided by actual authority. The twins came home on a Friday afternoon. Pette drove them herself. She carried them in, one in each arm, into the living room where Akusa sat in soft daylight, waiting with a stillness that held decades of discipline and 8 months of longing. Akusa had not allowed herself to fully feel the weight of their absence until that moment. When Pette placed the babies in her arms, the breath Akusa had been holding for months finally released. The twins were 8 months old, curious, alert, reaching for everything, full of life. Akusa closed her eyes for a moment and held them close, pressing her face into her daughter's hair, breathing in the simple reality of them. After a long while, she reached for the locket at her throat. She unclipped it, opened it, and read her grandmother's note again. The same 11 words, the same promise, the same truth. What you build in silence will speak for you when the time comes. She folded it carefully, clicked the locket shut, and for a moment tucked it gently beneath her daughter's blanket so it rested near the baby's warm hand, like a quiet blessing passed forward. Some mornings now, before the city wakes fully and the hospital phones start ringing and the bored emails begin arriving, there is a quiet hour that belongs only to people who have walked through something immense and returned with their spirit intact. Akusa moves through that hour slowly. She makes tea. She checks on her children. She stands at the window with the cup warm in both hands and watches the sky shift from dark to gray to the first thin line of gold. Petty comes over often. Sometimes she brings pastries from the Ghanaian bakery a few blocks away, coconut and cardamom, flavors Akusa learned to love years ago when she was working 2 jobs and signing her earliest papers by lamplight. They sit at the kitchen table together and talk about work, about the children, about the future, and sometimes they sit in a comfortable silence that only exists between people who have known each other long enough to understand that quiet can be rest, not emptiness. Akusa does not speak often about what happened, not because she is hiding, but because she has already processed it where it mattered most. In the stillness of room 4B, in the months when she could hear everything and say nothing. In that private interior space where a person learns without distraction exactly who they are and what they refuse to become. She learned something simple there. People can attempt to take your seat, your house, your public story. They can rearrange your spaces. They can try to borrow your name. They can smile for cameras as if confidence equals ownership. But the kind of wealth that lives in skill, discipline, vision, and work, the kind that signs papers and builds systems and holds institutions steady, cannot be replaced. It cannot be performed into existence by someone who did not do the building. It cannot be declared gone and become true. It cannot be copied by the right dress, the right smile, or the right timing. The building remembers who built it. There is a framed photograph in Akusa's office now, and it is not a picture of the hospital or a gala or a ribbon cutting. It is a photograph of a small village in Ghana taken at sunrise. Red dirt roads, the edge of an old house, and steps where a little girl once sat with bare feet in dust, reading like words were nourishment. Akusa looks at it when the days are long. It reminds her where the whole story truly began. Not in a boardroom, not in a university, not even in a rented office by lamplight. It began on those steps, with a grandmother who paid attention and taught a little girl to do the same. The locket rests at Akusa's throat again, warm against her skin. It never truly left her, not through the coma, not through the months of silence, not through the night when people told a story that wasn't hers to tell. It was always there, holding those 11 words her grandmother pressed into her palm before the sun rose. What you build in silence will speak for you when the time comes. It spoke clearly in a room full of chandeliers and cameras and people who made the mistake of thinking a quiet woman had nothing left to say. Akusa never raised her voice, not when Gloria tried to diminish her at the gala, not when she was directed toward the back of the room, not when she heard decisions being made around her while she couldn't yet move. She simply returned, and then she got back to work, quietly, precisely, without a single wasted gesture, showing everyone what it looks like when someone has always known who they are, no matter who tried to suggest otherwise.